Welcome to Cape Cod National Seashore. That's right, folks. We're on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and we are out at the beginning of the Cape Cod National Seashore. We are at the Salt Marsh, something like that, visitor center on our way up to Providence Town. We're going to go in this visitor center, get us a map, and move forward. We're gonna see a lighthouse, we're gonna see a lighthouse. You guys know I love lighthouses, so check this one out, Highland Point Lighthouse. Alright, so we got our passes here so we can climb the lighthouse here in a minute. $8 for adults, $5 for kids or students, because we're on a homeschool day here. We're going to walk out here to where the lighthouse was standing before they had to move it back, because they're losing about 3 to 5 feet per year of shoreline here. So safe to say, it's moved back. Alright folks, so if you remember in the movie The Greatest Showman, when P.T. Barnum traveled over to Europe and he encountered Jenny Lind, the opera singer that he brought back on tour. Now, we're going to show you again out here, but you can see in the distance a castle tower. Now that tower was in Boston when Jenny Lind gave a concert. People couldn't see it, they couldn't get in, so she climbed to the top of the tower and gave a performance from there for everyone. Well, this prominent Boston attorney never got to see her, but he was so enthralled. He had the tower dismantled and brought out here to Cape Cod and reassembled right out here behind this lighthouse. Now, legend has it that Jenny Lind still resides in that tower, and you can hear her voice at times. I'm not so sure about that, but interesting story. Jenny Lind right here.
My name is Mark. I'll be your guide. Watch your head, watch your feet. We don't want to have an accident. So these photographs are for the most part from 1996 when they moved the lighthouse from where it was behind us on top of the dunes back to where it is here today. Why did they move the lighthouse? Erosion. It was going to fall into the sea one day because of erosion. So these would be a couple of before pictures right here in 1996, and then after they moved the lighthouse. First lighthouse was built here in 1797. It was commissioned by George Washington, our first president. It was just a simple wooden tower at the time. But even back in 1797, they talked about this lighthouse falling into the sea one day because of erosion. In the 1850s, Henry Thoreau, in his book Cape Cod, he writes about this lighthouse also falling into the sea one day because of the erosion. Well, finally in 1996, they got around to moving the lighthouse, but it was no longer a little wooden tower. Now it was a 420-ton brick tower built in 1857. Wow. So, what did the town of Truro do? Who did they call? You would have called the International Chimney Company from Buffalo, New York. Right? They've moved many other lighthouses, including Cape Hatteras, which is 3 times the height, 10 times the weight of this lighthouse. They also moved Nauset Light down the road back in 1996 also. They lifted the lighthouse up off its foundation, put it on these rails, and then used hydraulic pumps to push the lighthouse down the rails bit by bit by bit by bit. When they got to the end of the rails, they removed them, put them in the front, push the lighthouse again down the rails bit by bit by bit by bit. Ultimately, they moved the lighthouse about 500 feet over about a 20-day period, put it on its new foundation, and reunited it with the old lighthouse keeper's house. This was the first lighthouse built on Cape Cod. That's why it's called Cape Cod Light. It was a welcoming light to the United States of America before boats went north to Boston. It's also called Highland Light because these are the highlands of Cape Cod, the highest point on Cape Cod.
What happened?
I said imagine the light was that. Yeah.
Do you see stars?
No.
I see stars. Alright folks, perfect site here where we were talking about the tower for Jenny Lind. It's right back here.
You know, we're not like almost on island, right?
One white flash every 5 seconds means true. That's our signature. It's called a characteristic or a signature on the lighthouse.
Now we're stand up straight, arm in the air, repeat after me. As a new junior ranger, I promise to preserve, protect, and enjoy this national park with my family and my friends. If I can have everyone's attention, we have 2 new junior rangers in the house. A round of applause. Wait, Steve, there you are.
All right, if you needed a clue not to get in this water, there it is. Still on Cape Cod, working our way out, and we are at, guess where we're at? Put another lighthouse. Check it out. This is a Nauset Light. Interesting thing about this lighthouse, although it has been moved just like the others to help preserve it, this is the lighthouse on the Cape Cod potato chip bag. We just happened to luck out because on Wednesdays from 4:30 to 7:30 it's open. Buddy, it's Wednesday, let's go check it out.
This is the lighthouse that is on your potato chip bag. There is a history of our lighthouse. It wasn't originally this particular lighthouse that was here. Originally, there wasn't any lighthouse here. 1798, they put the first lighthouse in Cape Cod. It had a signal of 1, and in 1808, they figured, we better get another one. We had lots of shipwrecks around this area. So Chatham went in with a signal of 2. However, the problem is they didn't have the technology to put the signal into 1 tower. So they had to have 2 towers. Pretty much they went along. They were able to have the signal for the seagoing traffic way out, but it didn't help anything in the local areas, which was here. So in 1838, Eastham was finally granted lighthouse. Our signal was 3, so you'll never guess. We had 3 lighthouses. They didn't have to be very high. Our cliff is 62 feet up, so the lighthouses themselves were only 11 to 15 feet tall with the tops on them. They originally were built out of brick. They weren't built very well. They leaked. They were not very stable, and they were built a little too close to the embankment. So by 1890, the lighthouses were basically going to fall into the ocean. So in 1893, they replaced those brick structures. Rather than using brick, they decided to use wood. So the 3 sisters were born. They looked like 3 ladies sitting on the bluff with a black top and a white dress. They were in existence for quite a few years, and in around 1911, they finally had the technology to get the signal into 1 tower called the Fresnel lens. That lens is actually in the Cape Cod National Seashore Center in the museum. So you can see that was actually in the 1 tower that we went down to, and it also was in this tower at one point. The 1 tower, what they did was they took 2 of the 3 sisters, they decommissioned them, they took off the top and reappropriated them to other lighthouses in the United States and sold the 2 wooden structures for $2.50 a piece. They were attached to a private house, and they had a great big history it was actually here in Eastham for a while. Those lighthouses, by the way, are located down the road a little bit, down Cable Road, and you can see them. The 2 that are missing the tops are the 2 that got sold off. The 3rd one, the center one, was actually attached to the keeper's house. It was fitted with the Fresnel lens lamp, and it also was fitted so that the lens could actually spin. There was one little problem with that. It wasn't built for that. So when the light began to spin, the whole lighthouse went like this and kind of shook back and forth. So to remedy that, they took cables, and if you look at all the old pictures, you will see cables hanging off of the structure and anchored to the ground to steady the lighthouse. So they had that until 1923. 1923, Chatham, remember, had a signal of 2. They were given these 2 beautiful government-issued 1870 towers made out of iron and lined with brick. They didn't need both of them. So they were made in a foundry, and they were made so that they could be taken taken apart. It was a government-issued type lighthouse. You'll see them all over the Cape. There's one in Nauset, there's one in Race Point, of course there's one in Chatham, and there's one here. They were made to be taken apart so they could be transported. And somehow they transported the second lighthouse from Chatham to here. Probably they might have put it on a truck. We're not sure. It might have been a horse and cart. We do not have any record. We do know it was taken apart because we have pictures of them putting it back together again. It actually looked like the one in Chatham as far as it was completely white, and the original top is what we have. Chatham's top today is not the original top. Theirs is in a museum. This stayed this way until the 1940s. In the 1940s, we got that iconic red, the one that kind of symbolizes Cape Cod. You see it on the sign coming into Cape Cod. You see it on the potato chip bag. You see it on the license plates for Cape Cod. It was put on there as a daytime navigation signal for World War II. And it remained there. The tower was electrified in 1955, so they didn't need a keeper anymore. So the keeper's house was sold during the 1950s to the keeper's sister, the last keeper's sister, and I think it's still within that family. That was done, and the government was controlling the tower. The Coast Guard actually was maintaining the tower in the 70s and the 80s, and around the later part of the 80s, it was deemed that they didn't need it anymore because, one, it was getting very close to the edge of the bank, and two, we had now satellite navigation. They decommissioned it, and they were going to take it down. The Nauset Lighthouse Preservation Society was born. That is who we are. We raised enough money to actually get that lighthouse moved. The National Seashore did not want to have to maintain the lighthouse. They weren't really interested, but when we stepped in and said, we'll maintain it if you help us move it to some, part of your property, and that's the agreement that we made with them. So in 1996, enough money was raised to move the lighthouse from 350 feet out that way to its present location. It was not taken apart during that move. This one came in one piece on the back of a truck. It was a hydraulic lift truck, so they adjusted the hydraulics all the way as they brought it over to the side very slowly, but it only took 3 days. The oil house, which is back here, actually came in the 1890s to the property when kerosene was starting to be used to light the light. Kerosene is highly volatile. It's not very good to store kerosene barrels in your house or the tower, so they made a oil house to keep kerosene. That was also moved in 1996. The keeper's house, as I said, was in private hands, and so the keepers, private owners, and the National Seashore made a deal that they would be able to move the house. So in 1998, that house was moved, and they had a 25-year lease, which is up in March 2024, but we don't know what's going to happen with it. The keeper's house was built in 1875. It is a standard government-issued type plan of a keeper's house, and if you look all over New England, you will see very similar keeper's houses, and even the structure, like the floor plans, are very similar.